Angeles. Joining us now, CNN political commentator Angela Rye. She's a former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. CNN political commentator Karen Finney. She's a former senior spokesperson for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Also with us, CNN political analyst Stead Herndon. He's national political reporter for the New York Times. The question this morning is, how is this pick playing? And what impact has it had already? And Angela, I'm struck by the fact that you say there's not a woman you have spoken with that wasn't screaming, crying, or thanking God. Why? Why do you think that is? Tell me about that.
Well, look at Karen right now. I think, part of it is about the affirmation of being seen and heard. It's not just over the last several days, it's been the last several weeks. And I want to tip my hat off to Karen, who, was organizing women and ensuring that we understood the severity of this moment. And I think that this was just an opportunity, right, to show people the power of what Black women can do when we make up our minds about something. And so that is why I said what I said, and I mean it. It's not a talking point. It's not anything I got from the campaign and they asked me to do. If you all haven't noticed, I haven't listened to much they've asked me or told me to do. So this was heartfelt, and Karen's laughing because she knows that's true as well.
Karen, one of the things that you said about all this that struck me is there's been a lot of back and forth, right? Yes, it's historic. I think everyone can agree on that. But there's some back and forth over whether, well, this was a safe pick or this was a bold pick. You say very clearly this was not a safe pick. This is bold in your estimation. Why, Karen?
Well, if you are a Black woman in this country and you have experienced racism and sexism, you know exactly what I mean. There is nothing simple or safe about going from, I was thinking yesterday about the arc of the journey of Black people in this country, and particularly in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. That is what we live with on a daily basis, systemic racism, economic inequalities, that struggle. Even, Angela and I have talked about this. And so for certain pundits to suggest that this was just a safe choice, no, it was bold because it says this is about our future as a country. This is about writing a new chapter in the history of Black women in this country. And when you talk about enthusiasm, as of last night when I went to bed at about 11:30, they've raised about $11 million in something like 4 hours on Act Blue. So I would say that is a pretty big sign of enthusiasm and excitement for this ticket.
So as said, Herndon, I have a two-part question. I'm going to give you the first part now and then follow up in a second. You have been reporting on Kamala Harris from the beginning of the presidential campaign when she was an early presidential candidate. And one of the things that you noted was that she was hard to define as a candidate. I wonder what you mean or meant by that and what might make that an attractive trait this morning for Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that makes someone that can be a difficulty in the primary that I think was a real benefit to her in the running mate search. We wrote that story at the outset of her presidential campaign, and it was one of the things that kind of was a through line throughout that primary. What progressive? Was she on the more moderate side? And there were some times that the policy choices kind of oscillated back and forth. There was the embrace for Medicare for all, then the rejection. There was a kind of embrace of kind of breaking up kind of big tech companies, the rhetoric of that, but not the actual kind of structural policy that we saw from the other candidates. And that made her a kind of enigma for some of the wings of the party. The progressive groups were kind of frustrated that she didn't necessarily do a full embrace of their policies, but there was no indication that she was a full-on moderate also. That's some of the reason that we see everyone kind of different sets of the party feeling pretty good today. It's not as if an Amy Klobuchar or Gretchen Whitmer, someone who would have been a firm a choice in one side. It's not like an Elizabeth Warren who would have been saying, okay, this is Joe Biden going against his instinct as a kind of ideological moderate. This is someone who kind of everyone feels a kind of hold on the policy front, and then you add in those representational qualities that the others have mentioned, and I think that is the reason why you see real sorts of energy, but even more than that, just little backlash also.
And look, and this is the second part of the question, I also think it's the reason that the Trump campaign and the president himself has had a little bit of a hard time figuring out how to handle this pick. She is not the easiest pick for Donald Trump and the Trump campaign. I think that is just a fact. And you could see it play out overnight in the Trump campaign and on Fox TV, which is, I guess, not the Trump campaign, but sometimes it's a distinction without a difference. I want you to listen to how Tucker Carlson, the best he could do was to somehow mangle her name. Listen.
Just tell Kamala Harris what to say, and she will say it. That is the whole point of Kamala Harris.
Tucker, can I just say one quick thing, because this is something that will serve you and your fellow hosts on Fox. Her name is pronounced comma, like the punctuation mark la, Kamala. Okay? Seriously, I've heard every sort of bastardization
so
of
what?
that. That's how it is, Kamala.
Okay.
Well,
But
I think it's out of respect for somebody who's going to be on the national ticket. Pronouncing her name right is actually not, it's kind of a
So
bare
I'm
minimum.
disrespecting her by mispronouncing her name unintentionally. So it begins. You're not allowed to criticize Kamala Harris or whatever
Kamala. No,
because Kamala Harris.
No, whatever.
All right, look, I actually think that's you're all laughing. Well, why are you laughing? Why is it funny, or is it funny?
It's kind of just ridiculous at this point. And I think, seriously, to defend Tucker Carlson for once, at least on the initial pronunciation, a ton of people do. And yes, we're going to have to get very used to sending people the phonetic spelling of Kamala's name. I don't understand why it's so hard. That's also why I'm laughing. But then at the end, it's laughable because he's like, or whatever. So it's like, no, it's not whatever. It is about you having to finally face what you have done to this country, to Black people, to Black women. There's nothing or whatever about this moment. We fought for this moment, we organized for this moment, and we celebrated when this moment arrived. So there's nothing whatever about this moment. And yes, I am calling this moment Kamala.
But to your point, to that point, picking up on that, Karen, when you look at it, yes, there is the absurdity of that moment, but there is also, what we see at play, right, which you pointed out, Angela, right? Black women have had to deal with forever. And so now there's this reckoning that's taking place in the country as a whole. It's also something we're seeing in this ticket. But to, continue to downplay, right, and ignore someone and purposefully mispronounce their name as if that is somehow going to diminish what they have done to get to this point, I think that is an important discussion too, right? Because we're going to see a lot more of it.
It's absolutely, it is part of the racism and sexism that women deal with all the time, people of color deal with all the time. It is like saying, sit down, shut up, we don't want to hear from you, you don't actually matter. And that's part of why this pick, again, I go back to Eric, what you just asked me, you can't say this was a safe choice, because this is going to, in some ways, mean that we're going to keep having this conversation. Look, people had to learn how to say Barack Obama. They learned it. We did fine. So they're going to learn. It's going to be fine. We are going to have this conversation. And to suggest, as part of that a woman, will you just tell her what to say and she's going to say it? Are you kidding me? This woman who was elected statewide in the state of California 3 times. She's someone who has been in the legislative branch as well as been an executive as attorney general, and then as also district attorney. This is a very accomplished woman with a very distinguished record. They're going to do, this is the playbook. They're going to do everything they can to try to diminish and belittle this woman. But that's part of the genius of this pick. It's going to backlash because it's going to remind all those voters who are already fairly disgusted with Trump that we saw moving away from him in 2018, why they think he's just mean and divisive and not right for this country.
I call him Schmucker Carlson, but it's an ethnic term, so he might not understand it. Instead, you also note, and I think this is interesting, about what we might see from running mate Kamala Harris. That's different, I think, than we saw as a presidential candidate. She's already leaned in a little bit to her own identity in ways that I think are more than she did early on as the first Black woman on a ticket, as an Asian American, a South Asian American woman of Indian heritage, and also on offense as a prosecutor. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that this is something that we might see from her. You know, the presidential campaign is one that tries to fit folks in boxes. There is such a drive to figure out who people are, both in the ideological sense, but also tell only one story about their personal identity. This is someone who has a rich and diverse background. This is someone who just like the kind of policy questions we were mentioning, can find herself in many different homes, kind of due to her kind of rich upbringing. And I think that that is something that she will have space to talk about. She can relate to many different groups. I think one that we should note is her presidential campaign did a significant amount of outreach to white women, to white suburban women, and I think it is a kind of reduction of this choice to just say that it's about people of color. This is also someone who can go out to those suburban districts and make the case to them, and I think that the kind of multifaceted outreach is something that we can expect from this running mate pick. That's what he gets when he chooses someone who has a national profile already. It's already doing the type of work and has already done the type of work that the Biden campaign wants to round out its November pitch.
Stead Herndon, Karen Finney, Angela Rye, thank you all for getting up and talking to us this morning. Really appreciate the discussion.
Thanks. Thank you.